Hi, everybody. Welcome back. We are here for another one of your questions about work. And this is going to be a special week. So for those of you who are joining us for the first time, I'm Roy. I'm a startup investor and in the future of companies that improve the future of work. And we've got a whole week with a founder we've backed today, somebody I know well, Amjad Masad, who started Replit. And maybe at some point you'll tell us the story of Replit because it's a unique story that starts with open source and then evolves gradually into building a company. And so all week, what we're going to be talking about is learning to program. And so today, Amjad, the question we want to start with is, if I want to get started, if I just never done it before at all, what's a good way to get started learning to program?
Funnily enough, that's what I spend my career kind of working on, right?
Yeah, no. I mean, you are Replit is a tool that helps with this. So obviously biased, but you're biased because you have expertise. So that's
right. And by the way, like Replit is not just the only thing you need to know about this. So, but I mean, it goes back to me, in my case, it was not, I already knew how to code, but I wanted to learn different programming languages. And the biggest hurdle I found was understanding and installing the tools necessary in order to get started.
Yeah, I remember when I tried to do Android, when we started a company that relied on Android, it took me an hour and a half and I wasn't even finished just setting up the tools to write my first line of code.
Yeah, and this is the problem I spotted. And then I looked around me, and a lot of people that wanted to get into programming end up getting demoralized, or they think that, okay, this is not for me because all these tools are incredibly hard to set up. What they don't recognize is that setting up the tools is actually harder than coding itself. And like coding is, in a lot of ways, a sort of artistic endeavor. It's like creative, it's fun, it's exciting, but they don't get there. And so my feeling at the time was, okay, you need to get started in coding before you go into these chores of setting up and figuring out how to do things. And I built one of the first in-browser programming experiences. So kind of like how you would use Google Docs. You don't have to install any software. Just open a browser tab. So today, go to replit.com, and pick a programming language and start coding. And I would say my biggest advice is just to get started, and that means reducing the time between you kind of setting up the ambition of learning to code and actually learning how to code. And let me give specifics here.
Yeah, please.
I would go to YouTube and pick a course using literally any language and go to Replit and start following along. So coding along with that course. I would recommend Python. And there's a FreeCodeCamp Intro to Python course that's 10 hours long.
On YouTube.
There's a bunch of them that's like, I really like those like 5-10 hour courses because it's like one single video. And by the end, you actually end up with a program that you built. So Replit on one side.
Yeah.
Start a Python REPL, YouTube video on the other side. And just go. If you can.
It reminds me of when I was a kid and you used to get a magazine and copy. I had a Commodore VIC-20 was my first computer, 20K RAM. You used to copy a basic program.
Yes. And actually, that's a great strategy to start learning, just like copying. Great writers learn how to write by copying other writers, and so if you can do it for like 10 hours straight, that's even better. Like not everyone can do that, but if you can like sit down for 1 intense session and at the end feel like you've learned something and you have this like innings of a new skill, it's going to be really powerful and really motivating. And like one of the hardest things about learning something is motivation. And the way to gain motivation is have these wins.
I love that.
Along the way.
It's almost like, I mean, I know a bunch of folks learn to their gateway drug for learning to program was changing something on the internet, like a MySpace page or something like that.
Right.
And the time, like what I'm hearing you say, is time to fun. If you can do something where you have the reward of actually enjoying something, that's great. I've heard other people advise that, you know, you should start with some specific project you want. And part of the challenge I've found for students with that is, if I don't yet know how to code, I don't actually know what's easy and what's hard. And so doing it by copying makes a ton of sense. And of course, we met through Codecademy, where, you know, I remember when Zach, you know, flew across the seas to recruit you. And I think you were Jordan still at the time. And just through your open source JavaScript work. And, you know, those courses I find can be really accelerative, but I love this idea of just beginning with copying. It reminds me, is on my list of projects I'd like to do someday. There's a YouTube series called Handmade Hero, where the guy makes a video game, but in C++, starting from the beginning. So that's obviously a lot longer than 10 hours, much more fundamental, but it just seemed like such a powerful way to play along and just sort of, you know, eventually you copy the moves and, you know, Kurt Vonnegut, you know, be careful you pretend to be, or whatever the line is, because you become that thing. So I think that's super. That tip size is really perfect. I'm going to try to pull in other stories about Replit as we go, but I think we'll stop there for today. So that's a great piece of This Is Not Advice, because I'm just not saying you should do this. He's saying, if you want to learn in this way, this is one way to go about it. So thank you, Amjad. To be continued.
My pleasure.